Have you ever walked into a room and felt your energy drop before a word was even spoken? Like something invisible just pulled the life out of you? That's not your imagination. That's the weight of toxic energy. It's real, and it's powerful. And if you're not careful, it can drain your joy, distort your self-worth, and leave you doubting your own reality. Toxic people don't always scream. Sometimes they smile while they manipulate. They pretend to care while they quietly sabotage. And the most dangerous part? They make you question if you're the problem. That's their trick. That's how they control. But here's the truth. You're not weak for feeling exhausted. You're not too sensitive. You're just human. And your soul is reacting to a kind of darkness that your spirit was never meant to carry. You're not alone in this. Everyone at some point has met someone who smiles in public but poisons in private. Maybe it's a coworker who constantly belittles you but wraps it in fake jokes. Maybe it's a partner who blames you for everything and never takes responsibility. Or maybe it's a friend who disappears when you need them, but expects you to drop everything when they call. Whatever the situation, it all leads to the same outcome: emotional exhaustion, confusion, and a slow eroding of your peace. But here's the good news. You're not powerless. And once you learn how to spot this behavior and deal with it, everything changes. You stop shrinking. You stop explaining. You start standing tall again. And if you stay with me until the end of this message, I promise you'll walk away with powerful tools to protect your peace, rebuild your confidence, and take back control of your life, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Toxic people don't want you to recognize your strength. They want you to stay stuck, stay silent, stay confused. Why? Because as long as you're unsure of your worth, they stay in control. They thrive on your hesitation. They feed on your kindness. They twist your compassion into weakness. But the moment you wake up and realize you don't need their approval, the game ends. The chains break. And that's the shift they fear the most. This is not about revenge. It's about release. It's about reclaiming your space, reclaiming your voice, reclaiming your soul. Because when you give your power away, you suffer quietly. You walk on eggshells. You doubt your instincts. But when you take your power back, you stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start declaring, "There's nothing wrong with me. I was just surrounded by the wrong energy." Human psychology is wired for connection. We want to feel seen. We want to feel heard. We want to feel safe. And toxic people exploit that. They give just enough to keep you close, then pull away to keep you chasing. It's not love. It's not care. It's control. And the longer you stay in that pattern, the more you lose yourself. But you don't have to stay in that cycle. You can rise. You can heal. And it starts by facing the truth. Some people are not meant to be fixed. They're meant to be left behind. You're not here to carry broken people who refuse to heal. You're not here to shrink so others feel big. You're not here to stay silent so others stay comfortable. You are here to grow, to evolve, to shine. And that requires a level of self-respect that makes toxic people uncomfortable. That's okay. Let them be uncomfortable, because your peace matters more than their opinion. Your energy is not a free buffet for emotional vampires. You don't owe anyone unlimited access to your life just because they've been in it for a long time. The moment you decide to stop entertaining toxicity, everything shifts. You begin to breathe deeper, sleep better, smile more, because you've made a decision to protect your energy like it's sacred, because it is. You're allowed to cut ties with what hurts you. You're allowed to distance yourself without explanation. You're allowed to choose yourself, even if it disappoints others. That's not selfish. That's self-love. And that's the kind of love that sets you free. Stay with me, because this journey is about to open your eyes, strengthen your mind, and awaken a part of you that you forgot existed. The part that's powerful, unshakable, and done being drained. Awareness is power. And once you start to notice the signs, you can't unsee them. Toxic people operate in patterns. They repeat the same cycles with different faces in different places. At first, they seem charming, maybe even helpful. But over time, the mask slips. You start to notice the passive-aggressive comments, the subtle digs, the way they always play the victim. You begin to realize that every conversation leaves you feeling smaller, not stronger. The most dangerous part is that they make their behavior seem normal. They normalize the disrespect. They twist your reactions to make you feel like you're overreacting. And that confusion becomes a trap. You begin to question your instincts. You second-guess your memory. You wonder, am I being too sensitive? That doubt is not your truth. It's their manipulation. But the moment you recognize this pattern, you take your first step toward freedom. You stop absorbing the poison and start observing the behavior. You realize that healthy people don't need to tear others down to feel good. They don't guilt you into staying. They don't punish you for setting limits. Toxic people do because they depend on control to feel powerful. You don't need to fix what's broken in them. You need to fix what they've broken in you, your trust in yourself. And it starts by believing your own feelings again. If something feels off, it probably is. If someone constantly drains you, that's not love. That's a warning. Listen to it. You were never meant to live in survival mode. You were meant to thrive in peace. But you can't heal in the same environment that keeps hurting you. Recognizing the pattern isn't about blaming others. It's about finally seeing the truth. And once you see it, you can't go back. You either grow beyond it or stay stuck inside it. And you didn't come this far to stay stuck. You came to rise. Once you recognize the pattern, the next step is to protect your mental space. This isn't just about setting limits with other people. It's about setting a new standard for yourself. You cannot allow toxic energy to live rent-free in your mind. That space is sacred. It's where your peace, purpose, and power live. And anything that threatens that space needs to be removed, no matter how familiar it feels. Toxic people want access to your emotions. They want to trigger reactions because that's how they gain control. Every time you respond with anger or frustration, they win a little. But when you guard your mental space, you stop giving them the fuel they need. You stop responding on their terms. You start reclaiming your inner calm, even in the middle of their chaos. This takes practice, because your mind has been trained to defend yourself, to explain, to overthink. But now, you train your mind to pause, to breathe, to choose peace over reaction. That small gap between what they say and how you respond is where your power lives. And when you master that space, no one can shake your stability. You don't need to fight every battle. Not everything deserves your energy. Just because someone invites you into conflict doesn't mean you have to show up. Protecting your mental space means being unavailable for drama. It means being clear about what you allow into your world and who gets access to your thoughts. You have to build emotional walls, not to keep people out, but to keep your peace in. You decide what voices echo in your mind. You choose what opinions matter. When you guard your inner world, the outer world loses its power to control you, and suddenly, their chaos can't reach you anymore. Their words bounce off your silence. Their manipulation fades into the background, because your peace becomes louder than their noise. Toxic people love to twist your words. They don't listen to understand. They listen to react, to judge, to manipulate. And the more you try to explain yourself to them, the more confused and frustrated you become. Because they're not interested in your truth. They're only interested in keeping control. That's why you must stop giving long explanations to people who have already made up their minds about you. When someone is committed to misunderstanding you, no amount of explanation will ever be enough. And deep down you know that. But your heart wants to be heard, to be seen, to be understood. That's normal. That's human. The problem is, you're giving your emotional energy to someone who sees your vulnerability as weakness. And that's where the cycle becomes destructive. You owe no explanation for your boundaries. You owe no defense for your peace. You don't need to justify your decisions to people who wouldn't respect you either way. The moment you stop explaining is the moment you step into your power. Silence, sometimes, is the strongest answer you can give. Every time you try to explain yourself to the wrong person, you lose a piece of your energy. You start to doubt your choices. You start to second-guess your needs. But when you realize that not everyone deserves access to your thoughts, everything changes. You speak less and mean more. You waste less time defending your truth and spend more time living in it. This is how self-respect is built, by refusing to argue with someone who isn't listening, by walking away from conversations that only exist to drain you, by choosing to be misunderstood rather than emotionally exhausted. Because at the end of the day, your peace is not up for debate, and you don't need to convince anyone of your worth. You just need to live like you already know it. Setting boundaries is not an act of cruelty, it's an act of clarity. When you create a boundary, you're not saying, "I don't care about you." You're saying, "I care about myself enough to protect my peace." And that shift in mindset changes everything. You stop living for approval and start living with purpose. You stop pleasing others and start respecting yourself. Toxic people will always resist boundaries. They'll call you selfish, cold, distant. But their resistance is not a reflection of your wrongness. It's proof that the boundary is necessary. Because people who truly care about you will honor your limits. They won't guilt you for protecting your energy. They won't make you feel bad for choosing peace over chaos. You don't need to apologize for having standards. You don't need to feel guilty for not letting everyone have access to you. In fact, guilt is often the first thing you feel when you start setting boundaries. That's normal. But don't mistake discomfort for doing something wrong. Growth feels uncomfortable, and choosing yourself, especially after years of putting others first, can feel unfamiliar at first. The truth is, boundaries teach people how to treat you. They send a message: this is where I end and you begin. This is what I will allow, and this is what I will walk away from. That clarity makes life lighter. You no longer feel stuck in relationships that drain you. You no longer carry the weight of everyone's emotions. You create space to breathe, to think, to grow. The most powerful people are not the loudest. They are the ones who are clear on what they will and won't accept. And that clarity protects them from emotional chaos. You can be kind and still have limits. You can be loving and still say no. You can be compassionate and still walk away. Because boundaries are not about pushing people out. They're about letting the right ones in and keeping the wrong ones out. One of the strongest decisions you'll ever make is learning to walk away, not with anger, not with resentment, but with peace. Walking away doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're wise enough to stop watering dead plants. Some people will never change, no matter how much you care, no matter how much you try, and your energy is too sacred to keep investing in what only empties you. When you stay in toxic environments too long, your mind starts to adapt to dysfunction. You start calling chaos normal. You begin to accept disrespect as part of love. But love should never leave you feeling anxious, confused, or invisible. Love is clarity. Love is respect. And anything that consistently robs you of peace is not love. It's emotional damage disguised as connection. It takes courage to walk away from what feels familiar, even if it hurts you, because part of you still hopes they'll change, that maybe this time it will be different. But you can't heal by waiting for someone else to wake up. You heal by waking up yourself, by realizing that no matter how much potential a person has, it's their actions that define them, not your hopes. Detaching doesn't make you heartless. It makes you conscious of what you've been allowing, conscious of how much you've been compromising, conscious of how drained you felt trying to hold on to someone who never truly held you. That awareness gives you freedom, because once you see the damage, you can no longer accept it as love. You don't need dramatic exits or loud explanations. Just quiet strength. Just the decision to stop showing up for those who wouldn't notice if you disappeared. That's how your healing begins. Not by fixing the toxic person, but by choosing to no longer be part of the cycle. Because the real power isn't in controlling others. It's in controlling what you allow into your life. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is leave. After walking away, the silence can feel strange. At first, you might question your decision. You might even feel guilty for choosing peace. That's because your mind was used to chaos. It was used to always being on alert, trying to manage other people's moods, trying to fix what was never your responsibility. But just because something feels unfamiliar doesn't mean it's wrong. Sometimes peace feels uncomfortable simply because it's new. This is the stage where your real healing begins. When the noise fades, you can finally hear yourself again. Your thoughts become clearer. Your emotions become steady. You start noticing things you ignored before, like how much energy it took just to stay afloat in that toxic space. You realize how drained you were just trying to keep the peace with people who thrived on conflict. Healing doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means learning from it without letting it control you. It means no longer blaming yourself for someone else's lack of respect. You begin to understand that you weren't too sensitive. You were just surrounded by people who made you numb to survive. And now you're choosing to feel again, to care again. But this time, starting with yourself. You start rebuilding your identity not around the pain but around your worth. You stop defining yourself by what you tolerated and start honoring yourself by what you now allow. This isn't selfish, it's survival. And not just survival, but growth. Because real growth happens in quiet spaces. When you're no longer explaining, no longer fixing, no longer begging for basic decency, every time you honor your needs, you build strength. Every time you say no to what hurts, you say yes to what heals. And piece by piece, the version of you that was buried under all the noise starts rising, not bitter, not broken, but wiser, stronger, more grounded. Because once you walk away from what dimmed your light, you begin to remember who you were before the pain, and more importantly, who you're becoming now. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 94F7896C0 A2890 A7I8. As you begin to heal, you'll notice something powerful. Your standards rise. You no longer tolerate the things that once broke you, not because you're angry, but because you've grown. You've tasted peace, and now chaos no longer feels like home. You've experienced the power of choosing yourself, and now anything that disrupts your clarity feels like a threat. That's how transformation happens, not in big dramatic moments, but in quiet decisions to no longer shrink for anyone. When you raise your standards, you stop begging for loyalty. You stop chasing people who make you feel hard to love. You stop explaining why you deserve respect. Your energy becomes more focused, more intentional. You're no longer scattered trying to please everyone. You're centered, calm, selective about who you let into your space. This shift may confuse the people who once benefited from your silence. They'll say you've changed, that you're distant. But don't let their discomfort pull you back. Let it be a reminder that you've outgrown environments that forced you to abandon yourself. You're not being cold. You're being conscious. You're finally putting yourself first, not out of pride, but out of necessity. Rising above toxic energy isn't about proving a point. It's about protecting your soul. It's about no longer being available for emotional chaos. You don't need to defend your peace. You just need to live in it. Let your boundaries speak. Let your silence speak. Let your growth speak. What once triggered you now teaches you. What once hurt you now builds you. That's the reward of healing. You stop reacting and you start responding. You stop fighting battles that no longer matter, and you invest that energy into becoming unshakable. The old version of you would have tried to explain. The new you simply moves differently. Because growth is not loud. It's quiet, confident, and rooted in self-respect. When you grow beyond toxicity, your energy shifts, and people can feel it. The ones who once controlled you with guilt, silence, or fear no longer have the same power. Why? Because your inner world is no longer ruled by their opinions. You've done the inner work. You've sat with your pain, understood your patterns, and risen above them. That kind of self-awareness can't be undone. Once you know your worth, you stop entertaining anything that makes you forget it. There comes a point when you no longer seek revenge or validation. You don't need apologies. You don't need them to admit what they did. Because your healing was never about them. It was about reclaiming your life. Letting go doesn't mean they win. It means you've decided your peace is more valuable than proving a point. That's strength. Quiet, steady strength that no one can take from you. As your energy rises, your standards become your shield. You no longer invite chaos into calm places. You no longer apologize for needing space. You no longer chase closure from people who were never honest to begin with. Instead, you walk in alignment with your truth, your values, your purpose. You speak less and move wiser. You no longer react to the noise around you, because your focus is on what's ahead. This is where your power grows, not in loud victories, but in the quiet choices you make daily. The choice to stay calm when triggered. The choice to walk away without explanation. The choice to forgive silently and rise loudly. You stop trying to fix people and start building yourself. You'll notice your circle gets smaller, fewer people but deeper peace. And that's not loneliness, that's clarity. Because now you understand that peace isn't something you find in others. It's something you create within yourself. And once it's yours, you never let anyone take it again. When toxic people try to trigger you, your first instinct might be to react, snap back, argue, or defend. But powerful transformation happens when you choose to respond instead. When you respond, you choose control. You choose calm. You choose clarity. And that shift rewrites the entire dynamic. Reacting keeps you chained to their game. It hands them the power to define your emotions. They speak, and you instantly react. They push, and you instantly pull. That's how they win, through your momentary loss of control. But when you pause, you step into your power. You give yourself a moment to breathe, to think, to feel, and then respond from a place of strength, not reactivity. Learning to respond takes practice. It means listening without absorption. It means taking a breath before speaking. It means asking yourself, is this worth my energy? You might still feel anger, but that doesn't mean you need to act on it. You give your emotions space. You observe them instead of being consumed by them. You learn the art of choosing your actions wisely. When you respond rather than react, you disarm the toxicity. You show that their attempts to rattle you won't work anymore. You're no longer giving your energy for free. You're no longer playing their mental tug-of-war. You're standing firm in your own headspace, regardless of what they throw at you. This is not about suppressing your feelings. It's about training your mind. It's about building a gap between stimulus and response, a gap where your true strength lives. In that gap, you decide who you are. You decide how to react. You decide what deserves your attention and what doesn't. Over time, you become unshakable. Their words bounce off you like rain off a roof. Their attempts to provoke fade into background noise. Because you've become a master of your own interior world, a world that remains unaffected by chaos. You no longer just survive the encounter, you own it. Mastering your emotional reactions is one of the most underrated superpowers. When you stop giving people access to your emotional buttons, they lose control over you. The toxic person may continue to stir the pot, test your patience, or provoke you with silence or sarcasm, but your strength lies in your ability to stay grounded. You don't match their chaos. You don't mirror their drama. You rise above it, not out of pride, but out of wisdom. You begin to realize that not every comment deserves a response. Not every insult needs to be challenged. Some things are so rooted in ignorance or insecurity that responding to them only pulls you down to the same level. And once you've outgrown that level, you simply don't return. You don't waste your peace explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Instead, you protect your energy like it's sacred, because it is. You've fought hard to build this inner stillness. You've worked through pain, silence, and disappointment. So now, when someone tries to drag you into conflict, you choose silence. Not because you're weak, but because you refuse to let their storms disturb your sky. Your calm becomes your power. You walk into spaces that once made you anxious, and now you feel nothing. Not because you don't care, but because you've taken your power back. Their approval doesn't define you anymore. Their reactions don't shake you. Their games don't interest you. This kind of emotional mastery doesn't happen overnight. It's built in the quiet moments. When you choose to breathe instead of react, when you walk away instead of argue, when you release instead of control. Over time, this becomes your default. You become the calm in the storm, not the storm itself. And in that calm, you find something rare: freedom. The freedom to be fully yourself, regardless of who's watching, judging, or provoking. That's the kind of freedom no one can give you, and no one can take away. When you reach a point where your peace is non-negotiable, you start to protect it like your life depends on it. Because in many ways, it does. Toxic people don't just steal your time, they steal your clarity, your energy, your joy. They twist your words, drain your spirit, and leave you questioning your own reality. That's why boundaries aren't just useful, they're essential. A boundary is a line that tells others how you expect to be treated, but more importantly, it tells you what you will no longer accept. It's a declaration of self-worth. When you set a boundary, you're not being rude, cold, or distant. You're being clear. You're saying, this is where I end and you begin. This is how I will protect my mind, my heart, and my energy. The hardest part about boundaries isn't setting them. It's enforcing them. Especially with people who've benefited from your lack of them. They'll push back. They'll call you difficult. They'll guilt trip you. That's because they don't want the version of you that's healed. They want the version that was easy to manipulate. But if someone gets angry at you for having a boundary, that's not a sign you're wrong. It's a sign they were taking advantage of you before. You don't have to justify your boundaries. You don't have to explain why you're protecting your energy. You simply live by them. And the right people will respect them. The wrong ones will remove themselves. And that's a blessing. Your boundaries grow stronger, your life becomes simpler. You spend less time fixing other people's messes, and more time building your own dreams. You stop absorbing negative energy and start creating positive space. You begin to notice how light you feel without the weight of constant drama. This is what freedom feels like. Not loud, not dramatic, just clear and strong. You stand tall in your truth, and the world starts to respond differently. Not because it changed, but because you did. Once you understand the power of boundaries, you begin to realize something even deeper. Detachment is not a lack of care, it's a form of self-respect. It means you no longer tie your happiness to someone else's behavior. You stop needing them to act right for you to feel right. You stop needing them to change in order for you to grow. That's when your healing begins to mature. Detachment is not coldness, it's clarity. It's choosing to care from a distance without being consumed. It's loving yourself enough to say, even if you choose chaos, I choose peace. That mindset puts the control back in your hands. You're no longer emotionally handcuffed to their moods, words, or actions. You stop dancing around their triggers, and instead, you learn to walk your own steady path. This doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop over-feeling for people who don't feel for you. You stop rescuing those who never asked to be saved. You stop bleeding for those who wouldn't offer you a bandage. That kind of emotional freedom is life-changing. You start to protect your heart the same way you'd protect your future, carefully, intentionally, and without apology. You begin to recognize emotional manipulation for what it is. an attempt to make you responsible for someone else's chaos. But not anymore. You're no longer the emotional trash can for people who refuse to clean up their lives. You've reclaimed your emotional space, and now it's filled with self-trust, calm, and grounded decisions. And yes, it may feel unfamiliar at first, this silence, this distance, this detachment. But give it time. It's not loneliness. It's alignment. It's you returning to your center. And the more you operate from that place, the less appealing dysfunction becomes. You finally understand that not everyone deserves access to your emotions. And that realization, that's peace. That's power. Detachment teaches you something powerful, that not everything requires your reaction, your explanation, or your presence. Some situations resolve themselves the moment you stop feeding them your energy. And some people expose who they really are the second you stop responding. That silence, that space, it reveals everything. Not just about them, but about you too. How much you've grown, how deeply you've healed. The truth is, toxic people thrive on attention. Whether it's praise or conflict, they feed off your emotional response. But when you go quiet, when you no longer chase, argue, or explain, they lose their grip. You're not playing the game anymore. You've stepped off the battlefield and chosen peace over pride, maturity over madness, and that drives them crazy. Not because they miss you, but because they miss controlling you. The silence isn't passive, it's powerful. It's you saying, I don't need to prove my worth. I know who I am. And in a world full of noise, that quiet confidence is rare. It means you're no longer seeking validation from broken places. You're not begging for closure. You're not waiting for apologies that will never come. You've closed the door yourself, and that decision becomes your freedom. As you embrace this space, you'll notice a shift. Your mind becomes clearer, your focus returns. Your goals feel closer, because now you're not distracted by chaos that doesn't belong to you. You've redirected your energy inward, toward growth, healing, and purpose. This new version of you doesn't beg to be understood. It doesn't fight to be heard. It simply moves forward. Not bitter, not angry, just wiser, more intentional, more protective of peace. And when you start living like that, you don't attract toxicity anymore. You outgrow it. You rise above it. You leave it behind without resentment, because peace was the only outcome you ever truly needed.